my studio lights on here.
So
in the shed.
Do you have a hangover?
If America's enemies wanted to catch it off guard, the 5th of July would be the day to attack. I mean, yeah, I had to work yesterday, so I'm totally scorched. Really a very hot day here in Oklahoma City. And then I went to bed fairly early, but I think because of the Oklahoma City Thunder Championship, it was an especially big celebration this year in Oklahoma City. Literally from about 9:30, 10 o'clock until 3 o'clock in the morning, there was man-made thunder all over the city of explosions. I kept thinking of a friend of ours that has an autistic child that doesn't do well with explosions. They apparently they make fireworks now that don't explode. They simply do the light in the sky. And I thought, well, this would not have been that young man's day because it was. We used to have a Boston Terrier too that freaked out at any kind of noise. So anyway, how was your 4th of July?
It was a very sunny, very pleasant, ordinary Friday. And today, as you can see, we have our traditional British summer. It's absolutely throwing it down here.
Well, I want to talk about just very quickly the 4th of July. It really isn't. It wasn't really a revolutionary war. It was it was the British Civil War Part 2, where all of the remnants of the people that were thrown out of the UK or tried to escape in the religious persecution afterwards had their revenge. Anyway, a friend at work said to me that it's almost as if the Confederacy, after our Civil War, escaped to Formosa or Singapore or something, and then came back to save the United States, a century later. I mean, it's just weird things. Anyway, it's great to have spent July 4th thinking about my friend in Wales. Mm-hmm. All right, we're up to, what are we up to now? We're up
to Goblet of Fire. Wow, that's had some reading.
I mean, this book has been tortured by my children. Again, all the pictures have been colored in. It's wow. Yeah. This was the first book that we got new. We got the first day. I do remember when it had its own cover. Those days, that long gone. I think this has fallen into the bath a few times.
I think a pivotal book as well for J.K. Rowling. So this was the one where the madness really took off.
This is, yeah, and her comments about this are, this was she put out a book a year basically.
Yeah.
And she's got a new relationship. She's got a new beau here in Neil Murray when this thing is coming out, and then she blows the writing of it. I mean, she didn't really talk about it until 2004.
Yeah.
And that's not true. I'm looking here. Entertainment Weekly in September of 2000, which is only a couple months after the book is released. Was this the hardest book you've had to write so far? Easily.
Yeah.
Why? The first 3 books, my plan never failed me, but I should have put that plot under a microscope. I wrote what I thought was half the book, an huge gaping hole in the middle of the plot. I missed my deadline by 2 months, and the whole profile of the books got so much higher since the 3rd book.
Yeah.
There was an edge of external pressure. What was that gaping hole all about? I had to pull a character. A Weasley cousin served the same function that Rita Skeeter now serves. Rita was always going to be in the book, but I built her up because I needed that kind of conduit for information outside the school. Yeah. there was a change in the title from Doomspell Tournament to Triwizard Tournament to Goblet of Fire, back and forth. Yeah, that flaw in the book and the crisis supposedly moved her to talk to Bloomsbury and Scholastic and say, I can't do this anymore, and to push back and to give them the advance that they'd given her already for the fifth book.
Yeah.
I can imagine the panic at Bloomsbury and Scholastic when she pushed that advance across the table.
Well, I
Yeah.
think it was a pivotal moment, certainly for Bloomsbury, not so much Scholastic, but Bloomsbury organised that tour of the UK for Goblet of Fire on the Hogwarts Express, which was a nightmare. It was horrible for everyone involved, but a nightmare, I think, particularly for J.K. Rowling. I think that's the point at which she realized she needed her own security organization, because in the UK, at least, the publisher, they're a small publisher drowning in money. They had no experience of what they should be doing. Somebody thought that this tour would be a good idea, but it was badly organized. There was no security. People were being informed by their local papers that J.K. Rowling was coming to sign all their books, which would have been impossible. This train was literally just slowing down in some of these stations, and then she was going to wave out of a window and speed up again. But it was extremely
And she
upsetting
hated
for her.
that, right? She hated,
Yeah,
leaving these children behind, all with these
yeah,
forlorn looks,
yeah.
Um,
Scholastic, from what I can gather, being a much larger, much more professional organization, never did that to her. So all of their events were very rigidly controlled. Expectations were managed, and yes, there were nightmare queues, but at least everyone was safe and everyone sort of understood what was expected.
yeah, yeah. By the time Deathly Hallows comes out and the open book tour happens, I mean, people weren't happy about how strict the security was, but about bringing books to sign that weren't Deathly
Yeah,
Hallows, that kind of thing, and being cast out of line and things. Um, but yeah, it just had to be that way. It was
yeah,
people really don't like. You came in 2018, so obviously you don't remember what that was like. But by Order of the Phoenix, I'm giving talks on the night, the Midnight Madness openings, and I'd be in a good sized Barnes and Noble bookstore, and there would be 300 or 400 people in the store. I mean, the fire marshal is coming in to make sure that they're not way over their limits.
yeah,
Um, Really, uh, a phenomenon. I don't know if we'll ever see it again. Uh, anyway, it's something about books, right? I mean, maybe
yeah.
I'll be on your phone now. Um, anyway,
You can't sign a tablet.
that's yeah. I was looking at these comments she made about the having to rewrite the book halfway through it and coming in 2 months late. Still comes off pretty close to a year from the previous book. So she's flying through these stories, and of course they're getting longer. People thought that Goblet was extraordinarily long, and we thought that until Order of the Phoenix comes out. But um, I I when I first charted Goblet of Fire, I was astonished because every single chapter has its parallel.
Yeah,
Of all of the Turtleback stories, it's the one that is most disciplined. There's no coupling of chapters. It's just straight across. Um, and in that respect, it's the perfect illustration for ring composition. But that she wrote it that way, and it was a perfect ring, means how much she was leaning on the structure. The book itself, uh, in my family, it was a great hit. Everybody loved it. Very exciting. The Triwizard Tournament. There's all sorts of things going on inside that book. But It is a bit of a disaster. Two people that I admire very much in Harry Potter fandom, one Steve Vander Ark, the other B. Groves, both told me that they were really disappointed in the book. Um, Steve Vander Ark said it has kind of a Scooby-Doo adventure ending where they pull off the rubber mask and, Alistair Moody isn't who you thought it was. And that was, he thought that was um, almost a cheat.
Yeah.
And then B. Groves, who, is such a fan of detective fiction at a very high level, was astonished at just in a way just how stupid the plot was. All of this stuff to get Harry to touch the Triwizard Tournament cup when they could have just made a port key out of a teacup in Moody's office, and bang, Harry's gone, and there's no issue. So it's a book of artifice that has what she called a crucial place inside the series. Anyway, I want to hear what the lake object is for this. I had to really struggle to come up with the one thing, because it is a book of artifice and structure and symbolism and all these things. I had to really struggle to find the one thing, but I couldn't think of a single thing for the lake. The personal thing.
I thought of several, but I quickly discounted a lot of them. So, Rowling's not known as much of a sports fan. Recently rugby, but that is very recently. And I'm sorry, Joe, I'm going to say that's very Neil led, that this love of this love of Scottish rugby that you have. But that the campground of the Triwizard Tournament, for me, that's the music concert that she travelled to down in Cornwall on her 18th birthday.
Oh my goodness. I've never heard of this.
But other than knowing she travelled to a music concert in Cornwall on her 18th birthday, that's all we know. So it's really, really quick lake stuff. There's the graveyard right at the very end, so we could sort of top and tail it. Well, I mean, John, she used to live in a graveyard. That's literally, she came home every day to a graveyard. But maybe I'll save that for another book. So I thought probably the safest thing to do is ask Jo what her lake inspiration was for this book, and she said bigotry. I'm quoting for an interview. She didn't tell me directly. So she said, because bigotry is probably the thing I detest most. All forms of intolerance, the whole idea of that which is different from me is necessarily evil. I really like to explore the idea that difference is equal and good. But there's another idea that I explore too. Oppressed groups are not, generally speaking, people who stand firmly together.
Yeah.
No, sadly, they kind of subdivide amongst themselves and fight like hell. That's human nature. So that's what you see here. This world of wizards and witches, they're already ostracized. And then within themselves, they've formed a loathsome pecking order. So it's been developed in earlier books, but we see within Wizarding Society, you have this structure of pure blood, half blood, and Muggle-born. And obviously, for me reading the book, and I suspect for Jo writing the book, this has clear parallels to the British class system. I suspect people reading them in different cultures will see things like racial bigotry or religious bigotry or whatever it is those particular societies are struggling with. And of course, we as readers are urged to reject that prejudice, that bigotry that's coming from a section of the pure blood society, and cause them to do many harmful and wrong actions. But that's a little bit simplistic in Jo at this point in her career, because while that's true, what we don't see necessarily is that prejudice is an inherent part of the human condition, and it's a survival instinct. We don't have time to do full character analyses on everyone we bump into on the street. So we rely on our prejudice to say, should I say, excuse me and apologize? Or should I just run away from this individual? We don't have time to do that. So we rely on our prejudices to save our skins. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. But because it's a survival instinct, we tend to be right more than we're wrong. And it also works both ways. So if we take the British class system, yes, there is prejudice from the upper and upper middle classes against the working class and the lower middle classes, and bigotry, but it also works both ways. So there is prejudice against the upper and the middles by the lower middles and the working classes, and that's not really explored within the Harry Potter series of books. We need to wait for Mr. Galbraith to come along, and then I think we get a much more mature and fuller understanding of prejudice, and where prejudice can be harmful and form into bigotry from both sides of that equation.
Seriously, the correspondent book, I talked in the last one about the parallel series idea.
Yeah.
What you're talking about there in terms of this being a street it runs both ways is a large part of Lethal White.
Yeah.
Which is the fourth book in the series. So yeah, it's a much fuller treatment in that book.
Yeah. So while I'm maybe criticizing Jo a little bit on her treatment in Goblet of Fire, there is, I think, quite a sophisticated self-criticism in there from her in terms of the Society for the Protection or Promotion of Elvish Welfare. I'm not going to call it spew. Nobody wants to upset Hermione. And this is, for me, so obviously a self-insert of what is a young, passionate socialist Jo at school and maybe university, where there is a cause that riles you up so much you have to do something. And the assumption, because nobody appears to be doing anything, that you're the only one that understands this issue, and you are therefore deaf to the people that this issue actually affects. Now, people use this plot line to criticize Jo, in that they pretend she's justifying slavery because the slaves enjoy it. They like being slaves. Well, we only really get to explore the characters of three different elves, and none of these elves are living happy lives while they're in this society. So I would argue, no, it's not a case that the elves want to be enslaved. They have certain instincts and they have certain traditions which they hold dear. But if the society was simply there to improve their welfare rather than trick them into accepting clothes and therefore having no home and place in society, then that campaign could have achieved something rather than just alienate the very individual she was trying to help. And we don't find out in this book, but we find out from Jo later that actually Hermione, when she goes on to become a politician, that's exactly what she works for. She works for improving the conditions of elves, rather than just trying to impose her society onto them.
Really, I don't know if we can do the links for this inside the notes you send out, but Katie McDaniels has written about the house elves as housewives and their relationship to the feminist movement. And she's written, she did the groundbreaking work, and then she updated it later, and both of them are very much worth reading in this context. Wow. So how do I top the how does the shed top that?
What's happening in the shed, John?
Yeah. Really, Goblet of Fire really makes this comment. Let me see if I can find it so I can actually quote this thing. About the importance of Goblet of Fire and in terms of the structure and stuff. And the question was, how vital is book 4 in the whole 7-book series to Harry? And she answers, crucial. Now, that's really a loaded word, because crucial is literally the sign of the cross. It's a point of intersection. That's the word she uses to describe this. The 4th is a very, very important book. Because you read it, something incredibly important happens in book 4, and also it's literally a central book. It's almost the heart of the series, and it's pivotal. Central, heart, pivotal, crucial. It's very difficult to talk about, and I can't wait for the day someone's read all 7. I can talk completely freely about it, but it's a very, very important book. All right. That refers both to, geometry, sacred history of the cross as a center of a defining point in space and time. And I think this is the time for me to talk about ring composition. One of the 7 keys, and really the last of the 7 keys, other than maybe mythology, which we really came to a much fuller appreciation of. We knew about mythology in terms of the Orestes and Harry Potter, but Cormoran Strike takes the mythological artistry up way up higher. And so to introduce ring composition here, this is a thing. Ring composition is the title of what anthropologist Mary Douglas gives to chiastic structure. And chiastic structure, you've probably seen it, is something like A, B, C, D, and then you reverse it, C, B, A, so that it's a palindrome. It goes, forwards and backwards, the same. And a ring story is a story that has its point, its beginning, and its end, right? They hook up so that the beginning and the end meet. There's a story turn halfway through the story that reflects both the beginning and the end. And then the numbers, the chapters, whatever, going out to the center, and those coming back are in parallel. That's why it's called a turtleback, because it literally is a description of a turtleback. Well, this is Rowling everything she writes. Longer Twitter threads are done as rings. And it's one reason why we want to find Lucy Shepherd, because Lucy Shepherd apparently is the one who taught her structure. We want to know if she learned it there, she learned it in mythology class at Exeter, where she learned this, and how it became really a borderline OCD fixation for her as a writer. And I want to talk about, I've waited until we got to Goblet to talk about this, because it's such a big deal. Goblet has so many fun things and important things to get. Just for example, there's the 5 points of correspondence with Philosopher's Stone and Deathly Hallows. The beginning and the middle and the end, there's actually 25 points of correspondence between the first book, the 4th book, and the 7th book. I gave a talk at the Samsung Center in New York in 2010, in which I first laid this out, and it's that lecture was published privately. You can if you go to Lulu, Harry Potter is as ring composition and ring cycle, and all the charts are in there, but every book as a ring and the series as a ring. But one of the fun things is how the structure of the first book, the fourth book, and the seventh book are almost exactly the same. For example, there's folks that we see in those three books that we don't see anywhere else. Okay, we got, Harry sees his parents at Christmas in both books. He sees photos of them too at the end of Stone and in flashback. But the Mentors and Prisoner. But the only other James and Lily time Harry has in the books is in the Phoenix Song Sphere, thanks to the priori and cantatum effect of twin dueling wand cores. It's only in the three books, too, that we meet Mr. Ollivander, speaking of wand cores, in Diagon Alley, at the Weighing of the Wands, and in the Malfoy Manor basement. Then there's Dumbledore in a mirror, okay? Harry's adventure in Stone largely turns on his ability to manipulate the mirror of Erised at the story's end. Dumbledore instructs him on just this subject. And we see Dumbledore in a mirror in both Goblet and Hallows. And each time Harry sees Albus, or what he believes to be Albus in those books, namely Faux Moody's Faux Glass and Sirius's mirror fragment in the Malfoy Manor basement, Harry is miraculously delivered from his enemies. Then there's the midnight middles of all three of those books, Stone, Goblet, and Hallows. Each of these three books has a center chapter in which Harry is up at midnight, headed out of bounds under his invisibility cloak for an adventure that doesn't end well. In Stone, Harry runs into Fluffy. Oops. In Goblet, he sees the dragons of the first trial and has his worst exchange with Ron before the Hallows bust up in the Gryffindor common room afterward. And in Hallows, of course, Harry is in Godric's Hollow for his midnight meetup with Nagini, the Dark Lord, and the living dead. Okay, the choice of midnight for these story turns, the midpoint of time reckoning, and Harry's invisibility at points foreshadowing that book's end, The Darkness Before the Dawn, in just those three books, joins them together. The most important one, I think, is the actual structure of the series of those three books, and it's two big plans and a scramble. Goblet features the 3 Triwizard Tournament trials, 2 of which require some planning and cheating, and the third of which is a scramble of obstacles. Harry has 2 adventures he plans in Stone, too. The trip to duel Malfoy and to release Norbert, and the third adventure he runs is the gauntlet of magic obstacles between Fluffy and the Mirror. Hallows likewise features 2 planned trips into the Ministry and into Gringotts, and a seemingly endless stream of obstacles in the Battle of Hogwarts. Each of these 3 adventures in the different books feature a plant, Devil's Snare, the Maid's Hedge, and the Whomping Willow, respectively. Broomstick Flight, after the Keys in Stone, the Dragon in Goblet, and Fiendfire in Hallows. Then you have the mythological creatures, Cerebrus, the Sphinx, and the Chimera, a logic test, potions, poison, the upside down dust, and the Ravenclaw door, and being saved by friends, the chess set, Cedric and the Spider, and the Patronus Brigade of Dumbledore's army. The architecture of harrowing that Harry goes through in those 3 books, the beginning, the middle, and the end of the 7-book set, are the same. And finally, I'm not going to do all 25, but the 5th one is Sacred Blood and Cursed Life. Everything turns ultimately not on being born with the right blood, but in having a pure heart and the right relationship with sanctifying or salvific blood. In Stone, Harry is saved by the blood of his mother and her sacrificial love that permeates him. The Dark Lord is cursed because he drinks the blood of the unicorn unworthily. In the Goblet Graveyard Nightmare at Little Hangleton, Harry loses the superficial protection of this blood when Voldemort uses it in a black mass liturgy to remake himself bodily. But we learn in Hallows that this blasphemous and desecrating service seals Riddle's fate by binding him to Harry in this blood. Harry's escape in the Forbidden Forest from the death curse is consequent to the bond of blood he has with the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord's carnally minded pursuit of the blood made holy by sacrificial love dooms him in each of the 3 books. Okay, so really, Rowling's artistry on the series level is astonishing in that she has the 1st, 4th, and 7th books structured in absolute parallel. Now, you read sometimes that Rowling got the Smarties Prize money or the Scottish Art Council, and then she spent a few years planning the rest of the series. No, she had that entire 7-book series laid out. There's no way she could have, invented that structure, having written Philosopher's Stone and then made up the rest of the series. The whole thing had to have been laid out. And that's that. And that's I remember reading Literary Illusion in Harry Potter by Beatrice Groves, who Nick and I are, I think, her biggest fans in the world, and that's saying something. She's got a lot of fans. And in that book, she mentions the chiastic structure on a specific point, and that's the dragons. That in the first book, pretty close to the beginning of Harry's arrival at Hogwarts, Hagrid gets the dragon's egg, and he hatches it, and we get Norbert, or Norberta. And that's a baby dragon. And then in the center of the series, literally in the center, chapter 19, the Hungarian horntail, we get dragons in their prime of life, the mother dragons protecting their eggs. And then at the very end in Deathly Hallows, we get the dragon, the dragon of ages or whatever, that's a prisoner in the Gringotts basement and escapes, is their means of escape from certain death from the goblins. That you can see the beginning, middle, and the end there, just in the cycle of the life of the dragons. But my favorite part, and I'm sorry to go on so long about this, is that central chapter, the Hungarian horntail. It's the center chapter in the center book of the thing, and it has 2 parts. First, you have Harry out after midnight, going to meet Hagrid, and he sees the dragons. But he has to get back to the common room because he has a date with Sirius. They've set up, I don't know how many weeks earlier, for November 22nd between 12 and 1. And, and of course, Sirius is upside down inside the fireplace. Well, this is gold on so many levels. One, you have the dragons, and that gives you the beginning, middle, and end of the series. But then you have the date. You're at the halfway point, and it's November 22nd. Now, I think in the UK, that's represented as 22/11.
Yes.
And so it doesn't quite work as nicely as it does in the United States, where it's 11/22. But the fact that it's between 12 and 1, 1 to 1, tells you that we're really, she's really laying on it's the halfway. And the alliteration in the title of that chapter is with a letter H, which has 2 sections and a bar connecting the 2 pieces. Rowling, I think now she was just playing games with those of us who were really convinced that Cormoran Strike was a 7-book series. But she, halfway through the 4th book in the Cormoran Strike series, she has part 2. But there was no part 1 at the beginning of the book, so we said, "Oh, it's the second part of this series."
We're all waiting for part 3.
That's yeah. Maybe that will be. Maybe we'll finally get that in Hallmark Man. But anyway, for me the most fun aspect for people that are, she says she always tries to leave a sweet at the bottom of the bag that you put your hand back in and find one more thing. That was in 2010 when we realized the ring structure, not only of the entire series, but inside each book. And Goblet of Fire, as that pivotal series, as I said, it's a book of artifice rather than one that's of plotting genius. But it really speaks to how well she had the series planned, that she wrote this thing on the fly, and had to redo the whole thing, and it's still an absolute pristine and perfect example of a turtleback structure for the book. All right, so that's my my shed contribution to today's
Wonderful.
talk here.
Thank you, John.
As we recover from July 4th here. Whew.
structure, chiastic structure, is such a fascinating topic because I'm convinced that inherently it will improve a story because there is something satisfying about, about traveling in both ways through a story, and then the end latching at the beginning. I think it's inherently pleasurable to read a story that is structured in that way, but it is not obvious. It's not obvious
No,
that that is
and
happening
that's
unless it's pointed out to you.
seriously, only two Potter pundits that I know of, Brett Kendall at Fordham at the time and Joyce Adele in California, picked up on the series ring. Uh, Brett Kendall, because he was studying Old Testament chiastic structure at the time. As soon as Order of the Phoenix came out, he says the series is a ring, is a chiastic, is a chiasm, which those of us who were reading him at the time were just astonished at his confidence. We haven't got the last two books, and he was dead set. This was the, and Joyce Adele was pointing out all the connections between the books, that especially 2 and 6 and 3 and 5 and 1 and 5, which was a real twist. But other than those two, nobody was discussing. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of millions of people were
Yeah.
reading these books. And yet nobody was picking this up. And that was just the series structure. My contribution, standing on the shoulders of Brett and Joyce, was to say it's not only the series, it's each book in the series. There are rings inside of rings. And then there's, when we get to Order of the Phoenix, you get to that gauntlet at the Ministry of Magic, and you have rings inside of rings inside of rings because it's a perfect ring structure. So it's absolutely subliminal. It has the power it has is on the subconscious mind and that satisfaction, and it's artistry because it's not obvious.
No.
That speaks to the author's seriousness to manipulate you by your imagination. People talk about how she was either laughing at people have causes in SPEW, or whether she was really trying to say, this is a horrible thing, slavery and such. But that was right on the surface in the plot point.
Yeah.
And you could have that discussion and everybody would know what it's talking about. When you talk about ring writing, it's like literary alchemy, which I'll talk about when we get to Order of the Phoenix, the Negretto novel, the series. All subliminal. I think Nick, like I gave that talk at the Samsung Center about ring composition to the group that shall not be named, easily the largest and most dedicated, and I don't want to say necessarily intelligent, but they are wicked intelligent. And I promised Jonathan Rosenthal, who was at that point the head of the group that should not be named, that he would not be able to read the series again in the same way after he heard that talk. And he was dressed up as Cornelius Fudge, as he liked to do. His cosplay was magnificent. And he looked at me and said, "John, we know it's going to be a great talk. We're glad you're here, but you don't need to oversell this." And then I gave the talk, and he walked up to me afterwards, grabbed me by the arm, and said, "John, if anything, you undersold that. I'm going to go back and reread the series now and try to find these things." And that group's, they insist that I share all my notes and stuff like that. So yeah, it was published. That's a world of serious study of Harry Potter. If the group that shall not be named did not pick up the chiastic structure, let me tell you, it was not a thing, because they talked about every aspect of those books. And this was in 2010, so it was well beyond the end of the series. So anyway, I don't know if ring composition is the thing I'm most known for, or the literary alchemy, but that both of those things are so subliminal, really beneath the threshold, that you're not seeing it, the threshold of consciousness, and that is the power of her writing, the symbolism, the alchemy, and the ring composition are the things that you don't get as you're running through the book to hit the pop punch, will Harry survive type thing. And yet it's the thing that's driving home her messages.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to go have breakfast.
So tomorrow we're going darker, aren't we?
Yeah, darker, quite literally. I will talk about the 3 stages of literary alchemy and explain why the big blue book, I've got it right here, the big blue book, this, it was blue not only in terms of the jacket that was on it, but the whole book is blue, and blue in the sense of, American music, the blues. I think pediatricians said that they had to treat children from young children carrying this giant book in their backpack. They called it the blue book disease. They had like spine injuries carrying this book with everything. And the other one was they were depressed. It's easily one of the most challenging young adult novels that has ever been a bestseller. I can't think of another one that's as challenging as this one is.
And I think that's why for lake inspiration tomorrow, I'm going to go to Rowling's darkest period, what she writes about being her rock bottom.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. I know what you're talking about, and it is, gosh, talking about you talk about the stages of Joe, right?
Yeah.
And I think you have to say that's the most important period of her life. It's where it's clear that's where the inspiration for Harry Potter comes from. It happens in that period, at least. We don't know what caused the creature in her lake to give her the Harry Potter inspiration, but it almost certainly had to have been in that period. Anyway, looking forward to that. Wait a minute. You're going to clarify this because I think I just messed that all up.
I'm going to clarify. So what Rowling self-describes as her rock bottom is her period after Portugal.
That's right. That's right. That's why you're the lake guy, Nick. You don't make gaffes like that. You don't make gaffes like that.
Pray for no rain in Wales on Sunday.
Okay. All right. So I'm off to breakfast. I'll see you again. I think I'll be wearing black. I may be invisible against this screen here in my shed, but I'm looking forward to it. Salute.
Okay, John.